Hello, everyone. My name is Dexter Fan, famed Rhinar cosplayer and specialist, recent top 3 at Battle Hardened Pittsburgh. And I guess now I have a YouTube channel. So here we are. If you've been following me on Twitter, you'll have known that there was like a secret project I was working on, since a lot of people, after my third place finish at Battle Hardened Pittsburgh, was asking for tips on my deck, and also were looking for a sideboard guide. So I have put together one for you. Normally, I actually just write down my sideboard guide in a little notebook that I bring with me to events. It's also where I write life totals down, and then right before my match, I will sideboard my deck, and then I will check my sideboard guide to see if I would have done it, if I did anything different than how I felt the night before or the week before, even. Since I am a Rhinar main and a Rhinar specialist, I'm constantly changing the deck. The deck is constantly it's constantly being iterated on. So how the deck is now is not how it's going to be in a week. Worlds will have a large impact on how my deck will look in the coming months, since there's just so many more players going than that went to this Battle Hardened, right? So expect this information to be like outdated pretty fast, but I'm hoping that showing you the process of deciding on my sideboard and deciding on my card choices, as you'll see as we go through these, it'll give you an idea of how you can also make informed choices down the line after Worlds on how you sideboard, how you choose cards. So the goal here is not to give you this deck list that is going to work forever, because there currently is no deck list that will work forever. Even when we were in Lexi meta, right? We started with this. We started with a very aggressive fuseless Lexi, and then people pivoted to a Frost Lexi. There was like a minor amount of psyoping with like Lightning Lexi, and then we ended up on a version of the deck that was very similar to Yuki Lee Bender's like very first like iteration on fuseless Lexi at the end of it. So even Lexi's deck was changing constantly. It wasn't always the same. They innovated, they changed based on the meta. In response to Warmonger's diplomacy, they started bringing in Trench. In response to CNCs, on turn 1, they brought in Trench. It was just like to expect a deck to stay the same in a meta is unrealistic. So just like that, my deck also will not be the same. The difference between Rhinar and Lexi, though, is that Rhinar has significantly fewer cards to work with. So there are just going to be staple cards. We're just going to get right into it. So there are just some cards that are staples to his deck, in my personal opinion. A lot of the Rhinars that I know have currently been low on Alpha Rampages and Red Barragings. I'm still pretty high on them. Especially in this deck, where a lot of my damage is coming through from Bloodrush Bellows turns. If I don't have extremely successful Bloodrush Bellows turns, I'm not doing that much damage unless my opponent wants to kill me, right? Unless they say no blocks on my swing big, or no blocks on like a bunch of 6 attacks that I'm throwing at them. So for me, I love having Alpha Rampage and Barraging Beatdown because they let me have a really strong opener. In the mid game, you're generally not looking to play this combo of cards, but Barraging Beatdown still presents 7 unless they block 2 with 2 non-equipment cards, which is quite good. 6 unless they block with 2 non-equipment cards, and then 5 with 2 unless they give me 2 non-equipment cards. Again, all very good in the mid game because I can block with 2 cards and make this 2-card play. Something that most people who have played Rhinar at this point have this like understanding that Rhinar has a really hard time clearing 4-card hands unless you're running builds with Pulping and Wild Ride. As you can see here, I have no Pulpings and no Wild Rides, so it's very hard for me to gain Go Again. I just have like E-Strikes, right? I believe E-Strike is the only card in here that gives me Go Again. Yeah. So since E-Strike is my only form of Go Again, I'm going to have a very hard time clearing my hand. And that means I'll be intellect penaltying myself like more often than I would like. So to avoid that, how I created this deck is to be able to block efficiently and then also throw back an efficient 2-card hand or an efficient 3-card hand. Okay, let's talk about card choices. I don't think there's anything particularly spicy about this first row of cards, aside from maybe Yellow Barraging Beatdown and the 3 Enlightened Strikes. Everything else is pretty standard for most brutes at this point. The Yellow Barraging Beatdown is because I am on a lower yellow count than most brutes in the game. There is a general consensus between brutes that we need 17 blues and 15 yellows plus tunic to really make sure that we fire off our Blood Rush Bellows, right? So this is our power card. When we play Blood Rush Bellows, we want to make sure we have 7 resources to follow up with a perfect claw, and then 2-cost attack. That'll usually get us 18 to 20 damage off this card, and that's very good. So for a long time there, I was on a lower yellow count than every other brute. I think I went down so far as to go to 11 or 12 at one point. And I was noticing some inconsistencies with my blood rushes where they were not doing the optimal amount of damage. So in order to mitigate that, I was previously on 3 red barraging beatdowns, so I went down to 2 reds and I added a yellow barraging beatdown as well. So now we have the 13 yellows that are pretty standard for Rhinar at this point, and then we have a 14th yellow from barraging beatdown. So that's my barraging beatdown. Enlightened Strike might become a sideboard card pretty soon here. I was noticing while I was writing my sideboard guide before the event that a lot of the time what I was trimming was E-Strikes. E-Strikes are really good, don't get me wrong. They are a 0 for 7. They're a 2-card 7, which is exactly what Rhinar wants. They are if it's in your arsenal and you need a new arsenal, you can go E-Strike for 5, draw a card, have a new arsenal. It's a great card to roll scabs for because you can go E-Strike 5, draw a card, and then continue, and then maybe go swing big or go pack hunt. Just like it's a good card that lets you push like 11, 13 possible points of damage. And then, of course, there's like the go again mode, right? So E-Strike helps you clear those hands where you have just 4 cards in them and no other way to get them out of your hand aside from rolling scab skins. The main reason E-Strike is in the deck, though, is for Warmonger's Diplomacy. Warmonger's Diplomacy is an insanely powerful card. I was high on this card from the very beginning, and I went to Battle Hardened Cincinnati. I remember going to Battle Hardened Cincinnati. And I picked these cards up for $2. No one was on them. No one was excited about it. And then like when Rhea showed the world that they were incredible, well, then they spiked, of course, right? But it wasn't just for Icelander that Warmonger's Diplomacy was good. Like this single card solves one of Rhinar's worst matchups, which is Viserai. This card completely destroys a Viserai turn, and it hoses like Vincett's turns as well. And it does a lot of work into it did a lot of work into Lexi. It does incredible amounts of work into Azalea, Dash.io. There's a whole bunch of decks that want to weave attacks and non-attacks together or activate their armor and their weapons in the same turn, right? So if you can go E-Strike into Warmonger's Diplomacy, people rarely block E-Strikes, right? Because the fear is like, what if a better attack comes down after E-Strike? You go E-Strike 5, go again, and then throw down CNC. That's incredibly dangerous. So people have usually taken 5 damage from E-Strike already. If you go E-Strike, they take 5, and then you play Warmonger's Diplomacy and stuff their entire turn. That's like 17 points of value. And then you get to draw 4 new cards, digging you closer to your power card, which is Blood Rush Bellow, right? Very good card, Warmonger's Diplomacy. And you're not really missing anything in terms of Rhinar's Blues. Rhinar's Blues are notoriously not very good. So we have a lot of space for flexing. So that's this row. At this point, we can move on to the second row. There's really nothing outstanding here aside from the Eye of Ophidia. I have been playing with Eye of Ophidia since about, I think I bought it at Pro Tour Baltimore. I picked up an Eye of Ophidia because I at the time I really wanted to test one, and I also kind of wanted a piece of the game, right? I'm invested. I love this game so much. I want to play with fabled cards. Eye of Ophidia is a great card. It rarely kills you. Rarely, right? Because you have Eye of Ophidia plus 3 other cards. You can block with the other 3 and then pitch the Eye of Ophidia to swing a swing big or swing a claw and then set up your next turn. The only areas where Eye of Ophidia lets you down are if you have Eye of Ophidia plus a D-React, like Reckless Swing. If you have Eye of Ophidia plus Warmonger's Diplomacy, or Eye of Ophidia plus anything doesn't work out very well if you have both of those in hand and you need to clear them from your hand, right? So if I start a turn and I have Reckless Swing and Eye of Ophidia in hand, I can't clear both of those very easily. I almost have to roll Scabs to do that, but the risk of rolling Scabs while you have Eye of Ophidia out or in your hand, is that if you roll a 1, all of a sudden you're stuck with a non-block for another turn because you are not arsenaling this card, right? If you arsenal this card, you're like praying that they CNC you. Okay, so that's Eye of Ophidia. I would say that Eye of Ophidia it's not necessary for your deck. However, I have enjoyed it quite a bit. A single blue pitch that will also dig me 2 cards closer to Bloodrush Bellow, like that's functionally the equivalent of what I'm hoping 2 Sink Belows will do. So I quite like Eye of Ophidia. Against some of the more aggressive decks, I will have to side it out just because it's so important to block certain breakpoints for heroes, and that's again detailed in the sideboard guide that's included with this deck. The deck list will be in the description, by the way, so the deck link rather will be in the description, so you can just go take it, play on Talishar, have a good time. Let me know how you feel about it. Comment if you will. And then we have my blues. We've already talked about Warmonger's Diplomacy. So the only other really interesting blue of note is probably Hold the Line. I talked about this bit on Nathan's channel, Savage Land News, but the reason why Hold the Line I feel like is so good right now is because we're in a meta where people love drawing 2 cards in a turn. We have Art of War, we have Ancestral Empowerment, and a Mask of Momentum trigger. We have Dash.io, who's drawing with Tome of Fendals. We have Dromai drawing with their new tome. We have Rhinar and Leviah with Bloodrush Bellows. We have there's just so many heroes whose core game plan currently involves drawing more cards, and the number of times Hold the Line is going to be a good card for you that blocks 5 is not insignificant. And if it's not going to be a good block for you that turn, you can either arsenal it and block 2 later on a breakpoint, or you can pitch it for 3, and that's perfectly acceptable as well. I personally do like to use my Hold the Lines when I first see them. It's a card that I'm not really looking for in the second cycle. Like a 2-block is fine in the first cycle, but a 2-block can get you killed in the second cycle. So usually I try to use them earlier rather than later. But obviously sometimes the things don't always go to plan. You know what I mean? Then we have our sideboard. I'm not going to go extensively into why every single card is good into which heroes. I'll just give you a brief overview of why cards are here. Cadaver's Contraband is for Dromai and lesser extent Prism. You can attack one of their allies, and this lets you put a Bloodrush Bellow right back to the top of your deck. That's why this is good. I occasionally bring this into opposing Rhinar and opposing Leviah, just because it is so critical to Bloodrush well and successfully against those decks that you want to have the potential of going like Claw, Cadaver's Contraband, and then set up a turn where you're going to be Bloodrushing them again. That's incredibly powerful. Erase Face is very useful in this current meta, but I don't have enough space for more of them, and they only do block 2. They're good against Viscerai, it's good against Phi, it's good against both dashes. So this is a very valuable card there, especially since Dash.io just did so well in Melbourne. We had to include Erase Face, right? We have D-Reacts, 3 Fate Foreseen, 3 Sink Below, 2 Oasis. I'm a very defensive Rhinar deck. Like there were multiple times on stream where people thought they were going to hit me and then they just didn't, right? And that's thanks to all these D-Reacts. Oasis specifically is for Kano, it's for Azalea, it's for Bravo. It gets around Dominate while still being in your hand, so you can still block with something from Arsenal, another card from hand, and then also Oasis on top of that. It's very good. Savage Beatdown, I'm going to talk with Savage Beatdown and Hardened Crosstrap together. These cards all come in together. So Savage Beatdown does not go into the deck unless Hardened Crosstrap is my chess piece. Savage Beatdown does not work quite as well with Fendel Spring Tunic, and I almost always need the Crosstrap mana to be able... Magic the Gathering coming out. I always need the the pitch 2 from the Crosstrap to be able to play a Savage Beatdown on a Bloodrush turn. So where you go Bloodrush, Claw, Savage Beatdown. And this is good into any number of aggro matchups like Ninja, Viscerai will bring this into as well. Like anyone who I need to take down to a low enough life total where I can start pressuring them into blocking me, right? Next, we have Arg Smash. Arg Smash, good for the mechanologists. I also bring it in against Kano. You can make them feel real sad by blowing up some E-Pots and forcing them to go off early. Rhinar already has an incredible matchup into Kano just because Barraging Beatdown exists. This card forces them to act so much earlier than they want to, and that's always very good. Remembrance is a busted card, but it doesn't come into every matchup, obviously. It doesn't block anything. It goes into those decks where you need to be blood rushing an opponent more often than 3 times, or you have the potential to blood rush an opponent more often than 3 times. I also bring it into a couple of I bring it into Kano, I bring it into Icelander, because since my deck is pretty red heavy, right? We have a lot of reds. I am very vulnerable to all red hands, which are really quite bad, and taking a whole bunch of arcane damage. So sometimes Remembrance just comes in as an additional pitch for a yellow pitch, right? Most of the time, this card gets back Blood Rush Bellows. You can also use it to set up Alpha Rampages with Barraging Beatdowns in the late game by adding those back if you've been blocking with those already. If you need more pressure on an opponent before you kill them, you can bring back CNCs. But typically, I would say this is used for Blood Rush Bellow, Alpha Rampage, and Barraging Beatdowns. Those are going to be like the 3 main cards that you get back with Remembrance. They're like a ton of Rhinar's attacks are very useful. So like Swing Big is a great pick. E-Strikes, I can see getting back as well. You just have a lot of options. And then the last D-React, we have 3 Tag. That All You Got. That All You Got is such a valuable card. It's so good into aggro, and aggro is Rhinar's worst matchup, right? So if people are bringing Fi or Katsu, they're going to be Kodachiing you or Phoenix Flaming you, or if Dash is in the meta, then she's like doing an underloop, or she's doing blue T-bones, yellow T-bones. Maybe she's like blue, yellow to 60, pistol shots. There's literally so many cards that this card just stuffs, and then you get a new card. Stuffing Mask of Momentum by blocking a Kodachi or blocking a Phoenix Flame with That All You Got is incredible. It makes your turn so much easier, and lets you keep so much more cards because you've just lowered their damage ceiling by a significant amount. Lastly, we have my so the cross trap we already talked about. This is going to be for your aggro matchups, like so something like Katsu, Fi, Viscerai. Again, those types of matchups. That's where we're bringing in cross trap. And lastly, we have Null Rune Gloves and Skullhorn. This is our 1AB and our 2AB, right? So this is pretty standard. You'd bring this into Icelander. You'd bring both of these into Kano, and then for the Rune Blades, you'd consider bringing in Null Rune Gloves. And for Dromai also, you might consider bringing Null Rune Gloves. I typically stay with Gambler's Gloves for that matchup, but hey, sometimes you need to stop Burn the Malls from killing you, right? So that is the deck, right? It's pretty straightforward, but maybe that's because I've played this deck like hundreds of times since June, or like variants of this deck, right? So like I'm very familiar with the gameplay. So this was just an easy, quick video to get myself started on YouTube. I'm going to be featured on Nathan's channel again, Savage Land News. We'll be discussing my deck list a little bit more over there, and also we'll be watching my the Bravo match that was streamed at Battle Hardened Pittsburgh. So you can head over there to check out our thoughts on that and my thoughts during the game. And then on my channel, next up, we're going to be taking a look at the 2-IO matches, and I'll kind of give you my thought process for what was going on during that game, and hopefully that is something that's enjoyable to you all. If you liked this video, I am constantly seeking attention and validation, so if this was something that you'd like, if you'd like to see more things like this, I have a couple ideas coming down the road, such as more gameplay videos, more maybe some Talishar plays, and then also I'd like to do, I don't know if like anyone's really doing vlogs of like larger events, so what the process is like to get ready for a Battle Hardened or to get ready for a calling, and like doing a vlog trip. So I think that will be really fun. If any of that sounds appealing to you, feel free to give me a like, a subscribe, and whatever else other people say on YouTube. And I will catch you in the next one, I guess, whenever the next one is. Mwah!